Again, like I said, on the 26th May 1967, the East Consultative Assembly mandated Ojukwu to declare the East a separate state as soon as possible. On the 27th May, Gowon declared a state of emergency in the country, created 12 states, and issued a code of conduct to the Nigerian Army. On 30th May 1967, Lieutenant Colonel Odumegwu Ojukwu, military governor of the eastern region of Nigeria, declared that area of Nigeria the Republic of Biafra. The federal government sent soldiers on a police action to crush the rebellion. Years before, the Ibo National Caucus, a committee of the Ibo State Union, let's explain it, and the Ibo court. What is Ibo State Union? This will help us to understand what we're reading a bit better. The Ibo State Union was supposed to be the socio-cultural group of the Igbo people. But I think it's not a group that Omoluabi can, even the Waja Igbo should belong to. And I'll explain what I mean by that. When the Ibibio started their own union, this was late 1920s, the whole idea was to push their cultural stuff and all of that. It wasn't about politics for them. They were the first in Nigeria to have a socio-cultural group. It was about culture and traditions, celebrate whatever it is that they do amongst themselves, all of that. The Igbos then started their own Ibo State Union, and for the first time we saw how a socio-cultural group can be very political in nature. There are many books on this I'm saying, but just stay with me. A good book, for instance, for this stuff is Between the Ethnic and the National by Remi Adekoya. It became very, very, another source is Anthony Enauro, that speech at Addis Ababa, 12th August 1968. You also see something like that. Everybody then began to, when they saw how political the Ibo State Union was, and please, if you are Igbo here, this is not against you. This is history. Just trying to understand why we are all where we are. That's what we're trying to get to. Not trying to demonize Igbo people or say Igbo people are bad. That's not, I don't have time for that. Just trying to understand that we're trying to go back to understand what led us to this point, because one of the problems we have in Nigeria is that we are too fixated on effects rather than causes. And if you don't care about the cause, no matter what you fix, you will not ever be able to actually get out of that cycle, that vicious cycle, because you've not really gone to the root cause. All right, so please stay with me. This is not anti-Igbo, just try and understand. As a matter of fact, I think many Igbo people are even victims of this thing, just that many of them don't understand, and then they are supporting the people who are putting them in trouble. I hope this helps everybody, to be honest, and I'm going to find a way to say it as measured as possible, because it's very, very explosive stuff. So here goes. The Ibo State Union was supposed to be a sociocultural group. We started in the 30s, but in London it started in 1943. The Yoruba people did not have our own sociocultural group or anything like that. The first time we had something like that was in 1945, and it was in London. It was called Egbe Omodudua. A lot of Yoruba people who were schooling at the time in London formed the organization. Of course, the head at the time was Chief Obafemi Awolowo. And then later on, they came to Nigeria and then restarted the entire thing, did it in Ife, and of course Lagos became the base of it. And you had Adeyemola Akija, all kinds of great men were in the group. It became an issue for, I don't want to go into the deep into all of those things, but it became an issue for Azikiwe and his people in the Ibo State Union that Yoruba people will be having something similar to what they had, which was similar to what the Ibibios had. By the way, not just those three, the Edo also had their own, Ikwere had their own, the Calabar people also, everybody was starting something, because, you know what, let me read something to you from this book. And please, I beg you, this information, it's meant for us, it's for educational purposes. You're not using this thing to go and attack anybody and say you are the problem of Nigeria. I'm just trying to explain how we got ourselves in this mess. It says here, by 1947, when the Richard's Constitution was being considered in government circles in Lagos, I'm reading Anthony Enauro. When the Richard's Constitution was being considered in government circles in Lagos and the colonial office in London, ethnic group consciousness had become a fact of life in Nigeria. The first ethnic cultural organization, the Ibo Union, was born at this time. Others sprang up, but like the Ibo Union, became more political in character than the pioneer Ibo Union. In 1945, a prominent Igbo lawyer, Charles Onyeama, a member of the Central Legislative Council, said in a public statement in Lagos that the Igbo domination of Nigeria was only a matter of time. This statement sparked off attacks on Igbos in other parts of Nigeria. This statement intensified the growth of ethnic and cultural unions throughout Nigeria. There sprang up the Edo Union, the Calabar Improvement League, the Egbe Modudua, the Ijo Progressive Union, and so on. The fear of domination of the rest of Nigeria by any one ethnic group reinforced the search for a form of government in Nigeria which would prevent it. So remember that. The point is that because of the aggressive nature of the Ibo State Union, everybody had to do something about their own group. One of the reasons I like the Egbe Modudua is that when you look at the charter, and if you're looking for the charter, let me tell you one book you'll find it. You'll find this in the autobiography, Awo, the autobiography of Chief Obafemi Awolowo. You find the charter there. You'll be able, if you want that book this weekend, just contact Redomi Books. It's on Telegram. You'll be able to get it. The charter of the Egbe Modudua is right inside that book, and it's more about the growth and development of Yoruba people and also Nigeria than it's about even the fear of another group. But people knew that something was up because of utterances by certain people. That's one. Number two, that Ibo State Union that Azikiwe was heading at the time, for instance, in 1949, Azikiwe was the president of Ibo State Union. But Azikiwe was the same person that was against Egbe Modudua that was founded by Yoruba people in Yoruba land. In other words, Azikiwe was living in Lagos, but he was against the formation of Egbe Modudua. As a matter of fact, to add insult to injury, Azikiwe then decided to form another organization with certain Yoruba people and called it Yoruba Federal Union as a parallel organization to compete with the Egbe Modudua that was formed by Yoruba people themselves in Yoruba land. And these are the people that will tell you in their history books that Yoruba people, or Awolowo, was the one who started tribal politics. This morning I was reading Awolowo, the Political Moses. I read a number of books this morning. I was just at the point I was very emotional. I was reading one of those books on Papa, and there's a page on a few pages on the tributes, and I read the tribute by Fela, and I felt disappointed. Essentially, what he thought was that, Awo introduced, ethnic politics into Nigeria. And this is something about the loudest amongst us sometimes. You can be very loud and be ignorant. A person is literally trying to help you have your own space and hold your own in a world of dog eats dog. And you think that person is your enemy, and you think that person is the tribalist, as though there's something to be ashamed when you call people tribalist. These guys were pushing the agenda long before Nigeria's independence. They started pushing that agenda in the 30s. And that's why one day I'm going to have a full session on this thing. That's why in the 30s you will notice what happened in the West African pilot that was owned by Azikiwe. How certain things were pushed in that particular paper. I'm not saying the entire people are wrong, but I'm telling you that your leaders have anti-bankonjejino. And so when you see people react a certain way, it's not you don't know why. You may not know why, or maybe you do, you're just acting like you are ignorant. But just in case you don't, let me read to you one of the reasons, not the only thing, but one of the reasons for the reactions that you get all over Nigeria. Meanwhile, remember what I said earlier, when you read the introduction, the acknowledgement, I like to read everything in the book, by the way. It's the way I understand stuff, because there has to be a reason they are writing it there. It's meant to be read. If you look at the acknowledgement, I'm going to read it again. By the way, the book is called Just Before Dawn by Kole Omotoso. Right? It was published in 1988. It says here, Acknowledgement. 2 years of intensive researching, writing and rewriting, of reading and traveling on 3 continents in pursuit of the dream that is Nigeria puts me in the debt of hundreds of colleagues, acquaintances, friends and family. To writers of books, theses, newspaper articles and keepers of private papers, I owe a debt of gratitude. Excuse me. Then it says here, the libraries of Ahmadu Bello University Zaria, especially Arewa House Library Kaduna, Bayero University Kano, Obafemi Awolowo University Ile-Ife, University of Ibadan, University of Bordeaux, Northwestern University Evanston, Illinois, National Archives Kaduna and Ibadan, Rhodes House Library, Oxford, Colinde British Library of Newspapers, London, Barbados Public Library, and so on and so forth. And he mentioned something that's quite interesting. Many private libraries were mines of information, and I acknowledge their support. Chief Obafemi Awolowo's private library at Ikene, Odia Ofemon's lived-in library in Lagos, Ladipo Adamolekun's library, especially in the area of public affairs and administration, helped me to amass a wealth of diverse information. Then he says here, the personal archives of Dr. Okechukwu Ikejiani were crucial in understanding the most salient issues in the shaping of Nigeria. Okechukwu Ikejiani, God, I'm trying not to change this topic. This man was the one who was in UI, appointed by the Zik government, was pro-chancellor and chairman of the governing council. Yeah. So it was a doctor, and then he came back and said it was DSC, Doctor of Science from Canada, from Toronto. And then somebody came around, discovered, and then they sent someone there and discovered that he didn't have that degree. It became a huge scandal. Eventually, he was moved and then got to NRC. All of those things that I was working was all Eastern stuff. So his library was one of the places that this man consulted. I'm not saying that's where he found it. We could have found it in the north, at Ahmadu Bello University or Bayero University in Kano. May have found it in Obafemi Awolowo University or found it in any of these private libraries. But what he found is actually quite damning. And this is what he says. Years before, the Ibo National Caucus, which is a committee of the Ibo State Union and the Ibo Court, had made a statement signed on their behalf by Drs. Mbadiwe. Who is Mbadiwe? Mbadiwe was the Minister of Transport under Tafawa Balewa. Mbadiwe was the one that was going to be made a prime minister, or made the prime minister by NCNC on January 15, 1966. Mbadiwe was the one that Frederick Forsyth said ran across open lawn, as though we don't know what he's doing. Ran across the open lawn and went into the house of the president, and that was the only place the soldiers, the coup plotters, did not search. That's Mbadiwe. He signed this himself and Mbanugo. And let me just read again to give you context. Years before, the Ibo National Caucus, the committee of the Ibo State Union and the Ibo Court had made a statement signed on their behalf by Drs. Mbadiwe and Mbanugo, strictly needless to say for private circulation. So this is supposed to be for them amongst themselves. So most see the thing where people they plan. The census misfortune and unavoidable circumstances now endanger our 20-year struggle. When you say 20 years, oh boy, I'm going to change this topic. This thing was written in 1964. They called it a 20-year struggle. Signed in the 1940s. In actual fact, signed in the 1930s. But at least they had 20 years to be able to implement it. The census misfortune and unavoidable circumstances now endanger our 20-year struggle for the achievement of our objective. Enemies of our fatherland have alerted the decadent Yoruba and the reactionary Northerners. These are the Pan-Africans though. It says, enemies of our fatherland have alerted the decadent Yoruba and the reactionary Northerners. The indiscreet utterances of many of our men have contributed largely to the dangers which now beset us when we have almost reached the goal. Thanks for the gift. The indiscreet utterances of many of our men have contributed largely to the dangers which now beset us when we have almost reached the goal, the promised land. You must no doubt remember that a similar indiscreet utterance by C.D. Onyeama, that same utterance that Atunenaro was referring to, it says, You must no doubt remember that a similar indiscreet utterance by C.D. Onyeama gave us no end of opposition by the Yoruba when he publicly stated that the domination of Nigeria by the Ibo is a question of time. Outwardly, all our official and unofficial utterances must adopt an opposite procedure, and we must always do our best to appear honorable, in quote, and cooperative. Remember, a statesman's words do not have to agree with his acts. In the East, the Efik, the Ibibio, and the Rivers tribes are still under complete control, even though their dreams for their own state have been completely shattered. Despite the intrigues of Okotiebo and Omo-Osagie, why did he mention this one? Midwest issue. I will have a session on this thing, I promise. Despite the intrigues of Okotiebo and Omo-Osagie, Okotiebo is the Shekiri, Omo-Osagie is Benin, and they were trying to become the major people in the Midwest after Midwest was created in 1963. So it says, despite the intrigues of Okotiebo and Omo-Osagie, we have succeeded in clamping Osadebe firmly on the Midwest saddle, thus taking care of the Urobo, Edo, and Ishekiri. Okpara showed his hands too quickly last year, 1963, when he was overconfident that the census figures would be to our advantage and that the struggle was almost won. He would have pampered Fani Kayode till an NCNC victory in the regional West elections was secure. Then we could have ruthlessly dispensed with him and put a more amenable person like Akinfo Shile in the saddle. Play up Awolowo at all times. This will keep up the resistance of Action Group members and stop them from uniting with the NNDP to form a solid Yoruba front. This is vital, and there is no harm in this pro-Awolowo propaganda, for he is no longer a headache or danger to us. We are happy that our protocol on cessation of newspaper attacks on Sardauna and other northern leaders have stopped. Amechi and Okafor are to be complimented so far. Everything must be done to appear to appease the Sardauna and Ribadu. Sardauna was the Premier of the North, Ribadu was the Defense Minister. So it says to appear to appease the Sardauna and Ribadu, but Balewa we can always deal with. If we can then win the West at the next regional election by keeping the Yoruba divided, we shall secure control of the federal cabinet and the country. Not in 1964 as we envisaged, but in 1969. 5 years may be a long time in our personal lives, but to a people such as ours, it is further time for preparation. I believe that some of us listening to this would either be in the rooms where conversations about power and politics in Nigeria are being held, or you sit at the table to be part of that conversation. You need to know these things. Don't be like the regular person on the streets who is just reacting to what's happening, not knowing the cause of it. That's why I don't like it when we just cry. Just be crying and complaining. You don't even know why.